Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And we are joined once again by our fearless cadet, the beast from outer space. Well, I guess from the south side of the moon. The incomparable fornicator of all space ladies and other genders from the universe and galaxy. He's ego without one. Spaceman Frank, everybody.
It was me! It was me all along! I did the totality!
We're not referencing a certain someone who's under federal investigation for alleged sex trafficking.
Was blacklisted faster than Benoit was.
Yes. Well, Benoit doesn't. There is no one named Benoit. That does not. That name.
Oh, that's right.
I've never heard of that name. I don't know who this
Is that
guy
a hockey player or something?
Yeah, we'll go with that. A hockey player who certainly did not commit a double murder homicide in his home, allegedly. And then himself. A double murder homicide suicide. Wow. Say that 5 times fast.
All right, we're wildly off track.
Yes. We are
typical.
As usual. We are Why Does This Exist? We are a podcast that talks about the very weirdest in pop culture, whether it's something wrestling related, which we are about to do, a crazy band like we just did a couple weeks ago with Ministry, and pretty much anything else in general. You name it, we'll talk about it at some point. If you listen to the show, good for you. If you don't listen to the show, good for you. You could find us wherever you find our other podcasts. You could do all the other things that everybody else is going to tell you to do. I really don't care. Best thing to do is either leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts or to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We just upload the episodes. You might even be listening to it right there, right now. We want to get to 50 people. That's how desperate we are in this world. That's how few people give a shit about this show. We need 50. We need to get to 50. We're at 47. Do that. Get us to 47.
Listen, just go ahead, listen to the show, right before you go to bed, set on autoplay, and do us a favor.
That's all you have to do. I'm not going to tell you about the other things you can do or what we'd like you to do, because that doesn't work anyway. If you like it, you'll find it in the descriptions and everything like that. All the links are there. They all work. I've tried. Okay. That's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. We are talking about wrestling because it's WrestleMania. Well, it's the night after WrestleMania. It's Raw after Mania. None of us are watching Raw, in case you haven't figured that out by now. Instead, we've decided to waste our time to entertain you, the people who don't care. So, put that in your pipe and smoke it.
All right.
Our wrestling topic of choice. We're talking about the worst storylines ever. Last time we spoke about New Jack, an iconic individual who, if you ever saw this man coming after you, you knew you fucked up.
Yeah.
Now, if you see his ghost coming after you, you know you fucked up.
I feel like New Jack's ghost is probably scarier than New Jack.
Yeah.
You're right.
Literally nothing can stop him.
Yeah,
No.
exactly.
It's like, I feel like this is evil Genie Jafar's nightmare, is New Jack. Like,
I think the Ghost of New Jack, that would be a hell of a horror movie.
Oh, that'd be so great. You know
That'd be a
what?
hell of a gimmick. Could you
Yeah.
imagine someone on the indie scene who looks kind of like him being like, I'm going to be the ghost of New Jack?
That would be really funny. I could see someone doing this.
Yeah.
If Super Dragon is a thing, I'm pretty sure that Ghost of New Jack could be a thing.
Yeah.
But it just starts stabbing everything.
Oh my God. Don't tempt Joey Janela. I'm sure
Is
he's
it-
working on it.
Is it a real knife or a ghost knife?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Or
The knife is
yeah.
fake, but the razor blade he uses to cut people is real.
Oh, okay. The blood is also real. All right. What's the worst goddamn storyline you can think of? Yeah.
There's
So
quite a
pro
few
wrestling
goodies
for
out
those
there.
of you. Yes, Rob, do something interesting. Say something interesting about what we're talking about.
Well, I mean, we've mentioned previously in our previous wrestling podcast some of like we've kind of touched on storylines a little bit, like specifically like when we were talking about like the bad gimmicks. I think we had brought up the Katie Vick angle. That is probably one of the worst. Like that's up there, definitely the top 10 of like what the fuck were they thinking?
Oh yeah. For people who don't know, since we'll start with the Katie Vick one.
Yeah.
Basically for pro wrestling, I'll say for people who don't watch pro wrestling, in a nutshell, there are a lot of really great and memorable storylines because they're very good or because there was a great payoff, such as, well, several that we saw at WrestleMania this year. I won't say them if you haven't watched them, but you should watch them and you know which ones I'm talking about. And people will talk about them for many years because of how great they were. Then there were probably about 5 times as many storylines that are awful
Yeah.
that people speak about because of how bad they are. There's got to be like people fondly remember the Attitude Era for it's the memorable storylines such as Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, or actually Stone Cold versus Redacted. Apologies.
Oh, that's true.
And Redacted winning the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 20 against Triple H and Shawn Michaels. And then a big hug with his friend Eddie Guerrero, who won the championship in the opener against Kurt Angle that night in Madison Square Garden. What an iconic moment forever between
WrestleMania.
Yes, between Eddie Guerrero and Redacted.
Yeah.
So that was a wonderful time. And then there's Katie Vick, which also occurred during the same period. Katie Vick is a necrophilia angle. Yes, in pro wrestling. Why? I have no idea. Katie Vick, Frank, if you want to
I have
explain
some
things-
idea.
Oh,
I have.
Go on.
It's-
Go on.
I was gonna say it's becoming more and more clear the weird sexual angles were why they were there because of a certain redacted person that was at the head of creative.
Yes, Mr. Redacted, who was the chairman of the board at the time.
Yeah.
And also had a memorable feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin that is lost to time and memory of who that person was on the other side of that storyline. They may or may not be investigated right now for sex trafficking violations. Anyway, Katie Vick, Kane, one of the great stories of pro wrestling, one of the greatest gimmicks of all time. He was burned in a fire that killed his parents. He is also the brother of The Undertaker. He has blamed The Undertaker for starting the fire. They fight. Kane is the Michael Myers of pro wrestling. Really great, just really great work, really awesome stuff. Naturally, the gimmick is fire, throws fireballs and all that stuff. Burns poor good old JR and a referee alive. And somehow they're back on commentary and refereeing later that night, about 20 minutes later. So merely a flesh wound for those individuals. But Kane had a girlfriend when he was at some year, X years old. I don't know if it was explicitly stated or if it was high school, but
I believe it was referenced as like high school. It's like a weird like break from the continuity where it's like, oh yeah, like Kane, like, you know, all that stuff with his parents burning alive and all that stuff. At some point, he was a high school jock, kind of
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. He dated a cheerleader. She died in a car accident. Triple H decided to bring this up. So like it was like a weird like, hey, all the time you spent like as a disfigured monster person, you still gotta go to algebra.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no love lost
See,
there.
maybe the truth is that Kane like repressed the memories of his parents burning alive, and then like the Katie Vick situation triggered it and made him become Kane.
I'm not even sure.
That was a
So-
stupid theory.
So anyway, if you may be wondering what happened to Katie Vick, well, Kane's driving Katie Vick to the prom or somewhere, right? He's got his little sugar bear next to him, just just having a grand old time. He's driving
like
her.
Picture Kane being like, she was my sugar bear.
Just picture a guy in a terrifying mask and a
Who's
tuxedo.
7 feet tall.
Yes,
Yeah.
a 7 foot tall monster in a mask, wearing a tuxedo, driving his girlfriend out, a pretty cheerleader, wearing her cheerleader uniform for some odd reason, just having a good old night on the town at Makeout Point. You know the one. And they're driving in the car, and somehow there's a car accident somehow, and poor Katie Vick dies and bites the big one. Well, not yet. She then proceeds to bite the biggest one when Kane decides to have sex with her corpse.
But the
This was
plot twist was, it was Triple H somehow filming this, and I guess it was supposed to be like a recreation, but that's like, why would you do this, Triple H?
In a
This
gas
makes you
in like
also
a
a
church?
creep?
Yes,
wasn't
they
like-
then they then proceeded on Raw to do a during this storyline where it was, I think it was during Triple H's reign of terror where he held the belt forever and almost never lost it, and when he did, it was totally meaningless because he would win the belt back in like a month. So
Yeah.
there was no point to even there was no point to this other than just giving him more title reigns. Like, it didn't make sense, and it was awful. And Kane had the Intercontinental title during what was one of the better runs that he had. And they had a unification, they had like a double title chain match or something. So you would think Triple H just fighting this like giant monster would be enough of a storyline as is. But no, they decided to throw in necrophilia just because. But anyway, during one of the vignettes, Triple H does a reenactment where he gets naked and he has sex with the corpse, which is a dummy, so that he could use the line "I fucked her brains out," and throws fake brains at the camera or something. I don't understand this. They rented a real funeral home for this,
Yeah.
by the way. It didn't do anybody any favors, and all it did, and it just created this really awkward angle.
Yeah. This was the beginning of the Ruthless Aggression era, and for those who don't know, the Ruthless Aggression era was like the vulgarity and the extreme, like, pushing the boundaries of the Attitude Era, but without the good writing.
Yeah.
Oh, it was
very hit or miss with the storylines because of how like extreme they got, because of what lengths they went to in the angles. Like,
Yeah.
where certain, like, even if certain angles were really good, there were certain things about them that were just unnecessary.
It was like, if like the Attitude Era is South Park, then the Ruthless Aggression Era is like later season Family Guy, where like Family Guy just like threw out being funny and just like wanted to push the boundary of what they could get away with on network TV. So it wasn't funny, it was just bad and like and gross at times. That's a good comparison of what the Ruthless Aggression Era was to the Attitude Era. Now, not all of the Ruthless Aggression was terrible, and I think a lot of people, especially in our generation, remember some of it fondly because that was what we grew up with. That was like when I was like watching wrestling every week. It was during that era of wrestling.
Oh yeah.
So like, I have fond memories of the Ruthless Aggression era, but like looking back on it now, it's pretty clear that it wasn't the greatest time in professional wrestling, at least in terms of the creative side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like one thing I'd like to point out too is like this isn't like a bad match or like a bad segment, though like
No.
the ultimate like the things you're talking about, they were like one segment on one episode of TV. This is a
Yes.
storyline that took place over weeks of television.
Yeah.
Like they set up like who is Katie Vick? Kane says, "Oh, this was Katie Vick," and then like the next week, Triple H is like, "You know, it'd be a great follow up if I fucked a dummy."
Yeah.
You know, so like it's one of those things that's like it's not just one bad thing. It's like we're going to keep trying, and you fail every single time.
Yeah. No good.
Yeah. And like
It's sad because it's led up to like the unmasking of Kane, which was actually like kind of cool, but like
The
the fact
unmasking.
that it
the
had to
un-
like start with this shit like was just like what the fuck.
Yeah, the unmasking of Kane was well. Kane will come up a few times in this probably
Yeah,
because
because
Kane's been on the receiving end of quite a few very awkward angles, and pretty much the only reason why he's recovered and is still so like held in such high regard is because he's Kane.
yeah.
And everyone seems to remember everything in between so much more fondly, and then they're like, yeah, then those other things happened.
Yeah, because this was like, it's funny because it kind of happened consecutively. So you had the Katie Vick thing, and then like that was very poorly received. So they kind of like brushed it under the rug and just like Kane and Triple H had their match or whatever, and it went on, and it was okay. It was like okay, like it was we'll if it's good wrestling, we'll go with that, and we'll
The match
pretend.
itself wasn't bad.
Exactly. So like let's just pretend that the storyline leading up to it doesn't exist. And that's kind of what WWE did. But then almost immediately after, they set him up with the storyline with Lita. This is only like a year later.
Well, also the Kane unmasking thing, let me just say for the record that the Kane unmasking storyline was great until he took off the mask, which was just some balding guy who like
Yeah.
had like dirt on his face. There was
Yeah,
no
yeah,
there was no
very
scar.
weird.
There was no scarring. There was no like real deformity. There was no like big issue or anything.
he just didn't wash his face for
Yeah.
20
Yeah,
years.
it was just some dirty bald guy with muscles, and
Yeah.
it was very underwhelming.
But he wasn't even really bald. He was like balding. Like he had like hair on the back of his head, but not on the front. It was like very like it was like someone like started shaving his head, but then like stopped halfway.
Well, the other problem was before he took the mask off, the mask had a wig on it,
Yeah.
so that made it worse.
Yeah.
Like it'd be like it would have been like it still would have sucked, but it would have been less bad if it was his real hair.
Yeah.
Or if Kane just inexplicably started shaving his head while wearing a mask, nobody would have cared. But because like because the mask had a wig on it, it was like what like the minute that you saw that, you were like, "Oh no." Like please you were like, "Please put it back on. Please put it back on." It was like when Kiss took off their makeup. How
Yes.
they announced that they would take off their makeup. Everyone was excited to see what they really looked like. And then they finally took the makeup off, and everyone was like, wow, these are the ugliest women I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was just like,
And
oh, you're just a dude, and like that's the same reaction with Kane. It's just like, oh, you're just a dude. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, it was worse in my eyes. The kiss on unmakeuping was worse because I went to the when I was a little kid one time, I went to the doctor. My mother used to watch the Golden Girls a lot. I've said this on the show before. My mother used to watch the Golden Girls. I also love the Golden Girls. And I went to the doctor's office, and the doctor had of course the doctor's office had the Golden Girls on in the waiting room. Then some TV show came on, probably Regis and Kelly or Regis and Kathy at the time. That's how far back they're going. And Kiss happened to be on after they had taken the makeup off or something. They didn't have their makeup off on. So I thought that I thought that I thought that they had the Golden Girls on because Gene Simmons looks like B. Arthur.
Except in
So-
the Lick It Up video, he looks like a friggin' troll.
So yeah. All right, we're on a roll. What's another shit storyline that happened?
Let's go into. I was gonna say, continuing with the Kane situation, because Kane just happened to like get like a friggin' string of bad storylines.
Well, yeah, I guess we should just continue Kane.
He basically kidnaps Lita, and so Lita was Matt Hardy's real life girlfriend and also on screen girlfriend, and there was a situation with that we could probably get into later on with Edge, and but that happened a little bit later. So in the early to mid 2000s,
most of these stories, by the way, will probably occur during the Ruthless Aggression era.
Yeah, a lot of them do. So Kane falls in love with Lita, and then basically like kidnaps her to marry her, and like it's like a forced wedding, and like Lita announces she's pregnant, and like they think it's like Matt Hardy's.
Now, just about every pro wrestling wedding storyline is awful.
Yeah,
with the exception
for, like, Macho Man, and
I was gonna say, with the exception of the first one, which was Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth, they're usually terrible storylines and, well,
borderline sex trafficking, and I wonder why. Again.
Well, yes, for redacted reasons.
So Lita finds out she's pregnant, and it turns out that it was Kane because he claims he's the father, and that he impregnated her, and I don't think they ever just like explained why. I don't remember them actually like saying like how he impregnated her. But
it's implied rape.
Yeah,
they never say it, but
very
it's
heavily implied. And so like Kane forces Lita to marry him. So then
I think he was like being up Matt Hardy, and then she's like, "No, I'll marry you to save him."
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like, you can go to the cops, right? There's some cops in the building.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
this is wrestling.
Cops
this is
count. Laws don't apply.
No, they really don't. Wrestling out of context is two people committing attempted murder and aggravated assault in their underwear every night in front of thousands of witnesses and millions of witnesses at home. But no one goes to jail. No one gets arrested. No one even gets fired. They just go about their business and are allowed to go to the next show. That's wrestling.
Again, the Ruthless Aggression era is when they started really going over the top with like, equivalent to like the Attitude Era, where it was like, it was edgy, but like not good. So it was bad edgy. It was like, that kid that you knew in high school that was like, would wear like, an upside down cross and worship Satan, even though they, lived in, middle class, came from a middle class, like Christian family kind of thing, it was just like, not a phase, mom. That was the, the Ruthless Aggression era.
Yeah.
So Kane ends up forcing Lita to marry him rather, and then I guess so. There was a new upcomer called Gene Snitsky that was debuting, and Snitsky was kind of being billed as like, similar to Kane, this big, tall, like gross looking guy who's like just like huge and muscular and is gonna like beat the shit out of everybody kind of thing.
And his famous words were, "It wasn't my fault."
Yeah, well, So
that gimmick was just bad.
To build heel heat for the new big heel Gene, and also at this whole point in time, like Kane is a heel because he's literally forcing a woman to marry him after he raped her to impregnate her, right? So that's pretty bad heel. Well, we need to make a heel that's worse than that.
That's
And
a
also
pretty
like
bad human being, let alone a heel on
exactly.
TV.
So to build up heel heat, Gene Snitsky hits Kane in the back with a steel chair, and Kane falls on top of Lita, which causes her to miscarry. And so
Yes.
this somehow turns Kane face. And also Lita all of a sudden like becomes like Kane's like actual like supportive. Like Kane goes to the hospital and all of a sudden he's like this loving, doting husband, and like Lita's all sad and like encourages him to get revenge. It's like
yes,
it's very strange.
She falls in love with him because of this.
Yes.
And isn't like Matt Hardy nowhere to be found at this point?
Yeah.
That's true. Matt Hardy is gone.
Yeah.
I will say this was a bad storyline, but it did bring forth one of the all-time wrestling gifs, which is Gene Snitsky punting the fake baby into the crowd.
Oh, I forgot that happens.
That almost I'm not gonna say like, you know, oh, like the storyline is worth it, because like no, this should never have been. They should have like immediately been like, no, we're not doing this. Like, this is a terrible idea. But it did give us that gif, so at least there's that.
Yes.
And just for the record, the reason why Matt Hardy wasn't there at this point is because this was around the time that his real life girlfriend Lita was having a real life affair with Edge, aka Adam Copeland, another wrestler on the roster. And
I believe he was injured at the time, and they started traveling together, and then and then things happened.
Yeah, and Matt Hardy ended up getting fired from the company, I believe, over this around this time. Like he came back like shortly after, but like there was like an issue there. Because I think he actually attacked Edge backstage in real life over this.
Well, they turned it into a real storyline, which is what you do in pro wrestling to try to make money, because when the truth gets out, sometimes you either just put him in a match so that it's like, all right, well, if you two are going to like not get along and beat the shit out of each other, at least do it on TV, because that's the logic there. Do whatever you want to each other. Like you could be as stiff as you want. And you could punch each other as hard as you want, but do it on TV in the ring so we at least make money off of this.
Yeah.
Like, because what good is anything without exploitation in America?
Yeah. Which, you could say that the Edge Lita thing was, I don't know if it's one of the worst storylines. It was kind of trashy at the time, but it wasn't terrible. Like, there was legitimate heat there, which actually kind of helped a little bit, the whole like rivalry between Edge and Matt Hardy. So, like, you know, I'm not gonna say that is like deserves to be on the list of terrible storylines. It was definitely trashy though.
It was in poor taste. I don't even remember if does Matt Hardy even win? I think he loses
one match.
Yeah, he wins one match, but I believe he loses the feud.
Yeah, overall he loses the war. Yeah.
Yeah. Like which he did both in real life and on screens, which is like a double humiliation.
Yeah.
Though I do remember seeing like in interviews, like Adam Copeland and Lita have both been like, yeah, you know what happened, but like the storyline and everything, like it really just made things even worse for us. Like they definitely were like, yeah, this wasn't cool, and now like, you know, it's we did these things, and then all of a sudden, all these people are yelling and screaming at us and not leaving us alone. So it quickly killed whatever romance there was.
Yeah, and well, I mean, this also, you have the rated R storyline where Edge is like with Lita the whole time anyway.
Yeah.
Whether or not they had already like gone back to being friends or like they were still together at the time.
They must have been, because they had the live sex show, and apparently that was not. It was a shoot. It was not.
That's what I was getting at. Is that they decided that people who may or may not be redacted decided that it would be a great idea if they did a live sex celebration after Edge won the championship belt.
Yeah.
There was a real bed in the ring, and they made certain moves and gestures. Allegedly, some of this was actually real, but you obviously couldn't see anything.
Yeah, it was all under the covers, but allegedly they did actually perform some sex acts. Allegedly.
Allegedly. So yeah, also poor Lita, this thing has followed her forever.
Oh
Like
yeah.
people still talk about it. I was in a band in like high school, like as I was graduating high school / entering college. I was in a band, and at one of our first shows, we were opening for Lita's punk band. I don't think they're still a thing, but we opened for her punk band, the Luchagors. They were all right. And I, I'm at the bar and I'm talking to her for a little bit just to say, hello, it's really cool. I really liked your band. It's a fun show. You know, used to have poster of you on my wall, and now I'm talking to you. It's really neat. Do you want to go to White Castle with us after? Like, I don't know, whatever it is that a stupid 18-year-old says to like a really cool hot chick, like that is famous. That's what I said. Um and like some idiot like goes up to her and is like asking her things specifically to set up so is that why you screwed over Matt Hardy? Like just some
Oh my
stupid idiot.
god.
And she's like, she's like, and she's just like, dude, just go fuck yourself. This happened 10 years ago. Everyone has moved on except
Yeah.
you, and you weren't even there. And like, you weren't even there.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
so like, I feel bad, but what, like, it is what it is.
Not that
Uh,
only it only did it happen like 10 years ago. Everybody involved is married with kids with other people now. So it's
Well,
like
I don't know if
ancient
Lita is
history. Well,
married
I don't
with
know if
kids,
Lita is.
but Lita has moved on to, well, possibly bigger and better things. Definitely better things. Not unsure about size, but size doesn't matter, kids. Any other
So
storylines with Kane that we can bring up? This
well,
we might as well just call this episode the very worst of Kane.
yeah.
one that I know a lot of people don't like, but personally I'm kind of a fan of is the corporate Kane era. Um, this is
I
where
I
the
don't
same
totally
monster.
remember it.
Yeah, it was during like the beginning of the PG era when a lot of people like kind of stopped watching WWE.
Oh, that
It,
explains it. I probably didn't
yeah,
see it.
Yeah.
Unless
this is
you're not talking about the embrace the hate thing, are you?
no, this is well after that.
It was when he started
Oh,
wearing like
okay.
a suit, and it was during like when like Triple H was like doing his whole
Oh,
corporate
wait.
thing.
No, I do
Yeah,
remember this. I do
this is
remember
the
this.
authority era, like
Yeah.
Yes.
early 2010s.
Yes, I do
Um,
remember this. It was really cringe and
it,
made no
it
sense.
the reason I like it is one, I feel like it's more in line with Kane's real life personality. So I'm
That's
like,
true.
oh,
For
it makes
sure.
sense. But like, this was like the twilight of his like active like full time career. Like he's well past 40 at this point, and they decided instead of being like this demon monster that you've been for the past like 20 something years, we're gonna make you a middle manager, and you're gonna wrestle in like dress pants and like loafers, and it's one of those things where like if you told children in 97 like, hey, that demon man, he's going to become like a authority figure, but not in like the cool like, oh my god, the demon's running the show. It's like, no, he's just gonna be a bit of a dickhead.
He's gonna be like your school principal, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. But like
Yeah.
to me, I was just like, this is hilarious, just because he's like talking like very corporate speak, and like as a punishment, one time he had to like run like the concession stand at the restaurant, but they showed him and he's like doing a really good job, and he's just like, oh yeah, this was a good night, fellas. Like it's just like, oh my god. Like I said, like I feel like spoiler alert, in real life he's a mayor of a town in Tennessee. Like
Yeah.
I feel
Yes.
like this was
Yes,
him
he
being
is.
like, I feel like he's not like I like heavy metal and like weird like Rob Zombie shit. He's like, oh no, like I like corporate responsibility and synergy.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is him cleaning up his act for his political campaign.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
basically what this was.
It was just like one of those like weird things where it's like I could see why he'd be like, guys, I'm sick of wearing a mask, and like
Yeah.
I feel like it's also a product too, of a point that I read about in a really good book called The Death of WCW. But they're
Oh,
talking about
wonderful book. Wrestle
yeah,
Crap. Wrestle Crap is a wonderful site. Well, is it still a site? Well, the people who run or ran that site wrote The Death of WCW and also The Very Worst of Pro Wrestling. It is
yeah,
an inspiration to this episode.
yeah. And in that book, when they're talking about like WCW, they talk about how like in wrestling, like you film at least one episode a week, a lot of times more than that. And wrestlers are appearing multiple times like in those like episodes. So like wrestlers age really fast compared to like regular TV shows cuz like you're doing like 52 episodes a year usually. And
Mhm.
if someone's appearing on each of those episodes, that's like longer than a lot of TV shows in one single year.
Yeah.
So like I feel like where we get like the Katie Vicks and like the like Gene Snitsky angle and Corporate Kane is like this guy was on TV for like 20 years. Like he's been on thousands of episodes of TV and like you gotta do like something different at some point. Like you can't be like, oh, here he is, he's back. He set someone else on fire, guys. You know, we
Yeah.
did learn our lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. He well, I had read in not his book, but I had read like an excerpt from some like from some other wrestling book where it was just like road stories. And he had said the reason that he cut the reason that he decided to to get rid of the mask was because um he's well one it smelled pretty bad because it was leather. So like him just sweating into it every single night, it definitely like and you can only clean it so many times before you just can't get the stank out. So one, the masks smelled really bad whenever he would wear them. So every few years he would go through a few different masks. And the masks were expensive because they were like, well-made bondage masks and stuff like that because, go to the very best, folks. And and I mean, who better to do a leather mask than someone who designs masks for gimps and other odd sexual fetishes. So he's got several of these masks on, and they had these steel grommets on them to secure the mask in place so that he could work with it. And they would go around his head, and they'd like meet in the back. And he had very long hair at the time, and when he'd take the mask off, or like as he like would go through his match, he's like taking bumps and everything, and he's like no selling punches, so they're like hitting him right on the mask, and these like steel grommets would like rip into his flesh and like tear out his hair over time. And over time, like it just stopped growing back. So he would have to start like shaving it in certain places so that way like the grommets just wouldn't mess up his hair. And then eventually it just tore out so much. And he was probably also starting to go bald for real, but like that certainly didn't help. So it got to a point where he just started shaving his head and like wearing a wig under like everything, which maybe he should have been doing it the whole time anyway. But he so like he just decided, all right, just take the damn mask off. And that was that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of worse of also bad Kane storylines. I mean, the Embrace the Hate wasn't a terrible storyline because it was bad. It was just a terrible storyline because it like made Zack Ryder look like a total chump. And like it was just a lame story. It wasn't like it was just lame. So
Yeah,
I don't think it was like I don't think it really like deserves a full explanation on this episode, but I think like it gets maybe an honorable mention.
Yeah, like it was good in theory, but like it's really worse for like the other people involved. Like it's worse for Zack Ryder because he just gets beat up and like he doesn't. It's not even his feud, which is even worse. And then like
Yeah,
John Cena, the guy he's trying to get to embrace the hate, does not do that at all. And then he wins. So
yeah,
he did not get his goals done. His buddy just gets beat up, and his girl stolen.
y-
Kinda, not really. They weren't really a couple, so it doesn't really matter.
there's a gray
John Cena
area.
just made out with the girl he had a crush on, and then Kane's
Yeah,
just there trying to like be evil and not doing a good job.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, the May well, yeah, even the what was it, May 5th or May 16th or
May
whatever it was,
19th.
May 19th. That's also an honorable mention. It's because there was just like there was an okay buildup, and then like it turned out that it was just the day that a movie that was not very good starring Kane came out, where it's like, wait, this guy's a monster who has allegedly murdered people and committed necrophilia and set people on fire and done all of these terrible things, and we're led to believe that this gets him a movie deal. Like he's a
Yeah.
lot like people would allow him to be on a film set, let alone within 15 feet of a school.
I believe
I'm
like the 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 like kayfabe, like the storyline reason for the May 19th wasn't necessarily the movie. It's just that day was the day that like his parents died, and then he filmed this movie, I guess for reasons like you said, like they're like if people offer you a movie role, you just take it, like
Well, they tried to play off like that Kane was really this crazy person on the movie, and like the other actors were afraid of him, and he would just lose control and try to actually kill them, and it was kind of stupid. It was a little lame, I thought.
It was very schlocky. But
Yeah.
yeah, the buildup was just like there was no real payoff, and it was kind of like in A Christmas Story where where like he's obsessed with solving the little orphan Annie riddle
Uh-huh.
and he finally gets the decoder ring after spending all this money on like Ovaltine, which is like a chocolate milk he really doesn't even like, and he like he decodes the message in the bathroom, and he's like holding up his brother from peeing or whatever, and he like he solves the riddle, and the riddle is just an advertisement for Ovaltine, and he's like
Yeah.
that's basically what May 19th was. Like
Yeah.
you like at the end of it, you got the exact same line was recited in both situations. A crummy commercial, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
What's funny too is they released a sequel to that movie, which also had Kane in it, but there was no like storyline tie-in.
Yeah.
They learned their lesson. It's
Yes.
like, oh no, like
For a
he's
minute,
fine with the sequel. That
for a
it's his
minute, for,
crowning artistic achievement.
for a minute, I thought you were talking about A Christmas Story, and I was like,
Oh no, I think they
Christmas
did
Story
release
2
a
starring
Christmas Story
Kane.
too.
Starring
they did.
Kane.
No, they did, but I was like, I don't remember Kane being in that.
You never know.
Just
Who
like
can say they've actually watched a Christmas Story too? He could very well
I
be in it.
certainly haven't.
this is true. I have
I think they
never
made a
seen
third
it.
one too.
They made 3 of those.
I'm pretty sure they made a third one.
Holy shit!
Or like a reboot or something like that, but I actually
Well,
have like the actual actor. I don't know.
maybe Kane is in one of those, and he sets the mall Santa on fire, which just rightfully so because that guy was a dick.
Yeah.
Any other Kane? We've been
I don't.
41
Yeah,
minutes in, and it's
we've been
only
talking about nothing but Kane.
it's
Do we-
only it's
Poor
it's
Kane.
the very worst of Kane.
Can I say something possibly controversial?
Yes.
Sure.
I think like the whole like Kane origin story and like his initial feud with the Undertaker is also kind of bad. Like it's not egregious, but I feel like it's again one of those things where they had to stretch it out.
Yeah.
And
Like
they
bad, like it
did-
doesn't like bad, like how?
like
That's one of my
It's-
favorite storylines. Or do you mean like it starts off great, and then it ends it kind of like the longer that they play it out, the worse it gets.
He did say it was going to be controversial.
It
I
was.
feel
It
like
is.
it's one of those things where, like, I feel like Kane as a character, it's like, I'll compare it to like, we mentioned Myers before. Like, he's the Michael Myers. Halloween 1, you know nothing about him. He's just killing people. Like, when Kane debuted, he showed up, the lights go red, he's a monstrous dude. He beats the shit out of people. It's like, oh my god, this is amazing. And then it's like, oh, he has childhood trauma, I guess. And like this and that. And Paul Bearer is his dad. And like, now he has magical powers unless he doesn't. And like, maybe his brother's forgiving him until he doesn't. And like, he doesn't want to fight Kane, the Undertaker, that is, until he does at WrestleMania, and then he beats Kane, and then it's like, well, what, like, what are we doing here? So like, I feel like it went for a long time, and like the payoff wasn't great. It was just like Undertaker won in a subpar match. We found out too much about him too quickly. So it's like, oh yeah, if they just had like, this is Kane, a mysterious man who is going to destroy everyone, and he hates the Undertaker, like, that's all I need. Like, you could be like, oh, like, they're brothers and they hate each other. But there's just, they kept adding more, and then over the years they kept doing more and more, and it was at the tail end of the time where you could do something like that, where like people will buy in. Like, if you try that today, unless it's like a very tongue-in-cheek like wrestling federation, it's just gonna be like, yeah, okay, pal. Like, we know your real name. We have your social security number. We know you're not brothers. We have pictures of you hugging your mom.
Yeah.
Well,
So like,
actually,
it was
you know
a
what?
different time in wresling.
It certainly was.
I
I guess
don't.
you
I
can
don't think
see
it
what you
deserves.
mean.
I don't think it deserves to be on the list of worst storylines.
No.
Looking on it from like the lens of like today, like, yeah, it wouldn't work. It's very hokey, but like, the early to mid 90s was still like the superhero kind of era of wrestling where like it was like all cartoon characters basically. So it worked in that time period, especially going into the Attitude Era where they were looking for edgier characters and like, but they were still had like the legacy of like, okay, these are superheroes. So it's like, well, how can we make someone that's like edgy to like keep up with like our new image for the 90s, but also like still kind of like this like mysterious like fantasy character almost, that's like is not a normal person and might have some kind of superpowers, to make him larger than life kind of thing,
I mean, well, by this logic, I never thought about this, but it seems like the supernatural powers were from the mother's side of the
I
gene
guess.
pool.
Yeah.
So I guess Kane and I guess the mother was a witch. That's the only explanation that I have.
Was she burned alive?
She may have
Oh
been.
my gosh, their mother was a witch. She was burned alive.
oh my gosh. And now all of a sudden Diamond Head makes an appearance.
Yeah.
Is Kane.
Oh my god.
Oh.
How that would have been really great storytelling if that was Kane's theme song.
Yeah.
But wow, what a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Or to
They probably
even
could have
use
gotten the rights. It would have been easy to get the rights to a Diamond Head song too, because it was.
Oh
like,
yeah, Diamond Head in the 90s. I'm sure
Yeah.
that catalog was like cheap.
They would have been like, hell yes, yeah, take this, because they would have been like, we need the money.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have even known what they used it for. They probably would have been like, some company some wrestling company wants to license, like, Am I Evil? Yeah, let's, like, why not?
Yeah.
They could have played him to the ring at some point. Yeah, so many missed opportunities for Diamond Head.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I have another bad Kane storyline. Yeah, you can go first.
I was gonna say the last one that comes into my mind, is the fake Kane.
Oh wow, I wasn't even thinking of that one. Yeah, that is equally terrible.
That was a stupid one. The fake Kane was really dumb.
This was in the post-mask era of Kane, where all of a sudden the classic Kane, or so it appeared, showed up.
Also PG era.
Yeah, and it was like, oh my gosh, like, who is this? Was this the real Kane the whole time? Even though, like, clearly it's not. Like, Kane has a very distinct body type.
Yeah.
And, like, the guy who plays it, Luke Gallows, who is a big dude, but, like, not quite to the same level, you know. He's
Yeah.
got different, he has tattoos, so he had to cover them up. He was like 19 at the time, I think. So very, very young. So they are like, oh, like we're testing this out. Like maybe we'll like you're getting up there, maybe we'll like basically pass the gimmick over to this guy. No one bought it. He had a terrible wig. They had one match and like literally Kane like threw him out of the building and out of the WWE basically. And it
Yeah.
was just like one of those things where it's like, oh, it's a fake Kane.
But they
Yeah.
also, but in the lead up, they booked it where Kane was like afraid of fake Kane.
Yeah.
Even though he's smaller, even though he's bigger than fake Kane, um, you know, he is still doing all these terrible things. But it's like, oh no, look out. This guy, he does the occasional choke slam. Like he didn't even really do much. Like it
I
wasn't
don't
like, oh
even.
my.
Did he even use the tombstone? Because at this point, Kane wasn't really using the tombstone much.
Yeah. I know like because I remember like seeing stuff about this. Like I think he like studied a lot of his matches and like his mannerisms and his moves. But I don't remember. I think at this point they're like trying to get away from doing like pile drivers and stuff. So I think it was like, oh, like, you know, I gotta do the choke slam, I gotta do like the top rope clothesline and like the sit up and everything. But I don't remember him doing the actual pile driver.
Uh, I mean, at that point, it seemed like the only person allowed to use a pile driver related move was the Undertaker, but
Yeah.
also because the tombstone is incredibly
Yeah,
safe. The way that him and Kane did it were incredibly safe.
yeah.
With Kane, there's a lot more room for error because of how fast it is, but his setup takes longer so that he can like position the guy so that they don't feel anything, where the Undertaker is very slow, so he has enough time to adjust.
I also
Yeah.
just realized that both Kane and the Undertaker had storylines involving fake versions of themselves, like
Yes, I was going to
15 years
say that.
apart.
Yes, I was going to say that this was not the first clone storyline, and
Yeah.
no, there has never been a clone storyline that was ever good.
No, because I was gonna bring up fake Razor and fake Diesel and how
Yeah,
stupid that was.
yeah. So
So
clone storylines. Let's go. Let's get into them.
yeah,
Not
so
good.
I don't know. I guess fake Razor and fake Diesel were probably the first one because that was in the early 90s. That was like what, 94 or 95 when Razor and Diesel left the company.
There was like legacy gimmicks, I think, like in Japan and especially Mexico, but this was like the
Yeah.
first time where it's like, no, this is the character, even though it's not.
Yeah,
Like I
it was
don't,
like blatantly not the same guys, but they were like like trying to be the same guys, and like so
yeah,
like for those who don't know, Diesel and Razor Ramon, aka Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, left WWE. They were like the two of the top guys in the company in the mid '90s, and they were demanding more money, which Vince did not want to pay out at the time. So they decided to leave the company to go to WCW and had a pretty successful run in WCW. Um, at the time, I guess because Vince wanted to be petty, or I mean, Redacted wanted to be petty, decided to keep their characters and have two other guys that kind of looked like them, but were clearly not them, play the characters of Diesel and Razor Ramon. And it was stupid. And I think they lasted like, what, like a month before they're like, just like completely like booed off the stage and like nobody cared about them. And they kind of just like slipped into obscurity.
It was very quick because the audience did not react how Redacted imagined they would.
No, not
And
at all.
they like they immediately just booed them way out of the building. Actually, this is still Kane adjacent because Kane was the fake Diesel.
Oh, that's
Oh,
oh my
yeah.
god! Wow, this is really the worst of Kane. Poor
Yes,
Kane.
another bad gimmick that Kane had before he was Kane. This one was the one that basically Kane was the very last gimmick that this poor son of a bitch at the time, Glenn Jacobs, had.
Yeah,
Kane was the very last straw. Kane was a Hail Mary, basically.
yeah.
because
before
all
that,
he had were these terrible gimmicks.
yeah, before that, he was like an evil dentist.
Yes,
He was
Dr. Isaac Yankem DDS. That's the very bad gimmick. He like for some weird reason, this was an era with like the late 80s, early 90s was like it was still the cartoon era, but like it was at its cartooniest where like
Yeah.
everything was a gimmick. Like and I mean when I say everything, I mean everything. Like you have Doink the Clown who was an evil circus clown, which was one of the best cartoon gimmicks, but you had you had the Goon, who was a hockey player who, for some reason, also wrestled. You had what the
Erwin
hell
R.
was it?
Shyster.
Yes, you had Erwin R. Shyster, who was the tax man.
Yeah.
For some reason, he was a tax man who also wrestled. I guess he was a bad accountant, so he had, or he made so much money wrestling that he would just pursue his passion during the day of being an accountant. I don't know. You figure out the storyline, or I don't remember the name of the guy who was the baseball player, but they had a baseball player too, who, despite making millions during the day and at night, he decided that he enjoyed taking bumps, so he would be a wrestler on the side. I don't know.
I don't remember what the name of the baseball guy was, but I know it was played by the Brooklyn Brawler, and
Yes.
it was during a baseball strike. So the idea was like, oh, I can't play baseball, so now I'm going to like be a wrestler. And it was like, yeah, that was also one that lasted like maybe a couple weeks. So I think
I
like
guess
they started and
I
then
guess
like
as long as
this,
the strike.
yeah, exactly. Like the strike ended soon afterwards, and they're like, well, all right, we don't need to keep this going.
No, we don't. Jesus. Um, we also other bad gimmicks involve of everyday people. You have Duke the Dumpster Drozy, who was your garbage man, which honestly, that one kind of makes sense. I could see most sanitation workers just deciding that they wanted to be wrestlers and like being independent wrestlers just because. For some weird reason, that's the only one that makes sense that it would happen. Uh, um,
And it showed him like sleeping in his garbage truck, which is like not the front seat where you would think like he had a dirty mattress in the back of his dirty truck.
Oh
Like
God.
that's like
that's
it,
extremely dangerous.
yeah,
Yeah. When
exactly.
someone hits the lever, you get friggin' like
You're
smushed
dead.
in
You're
the
dead,
compactor.
buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah, okay, that's weird. Yeah,
It's kind of funny that like Glenn Jacobs is like not only did he play the brother of the Undertaker, he kind of was like in some ways like the mirror image of like but like in a bad way of the Undertaker because you think about when Taker came to WWE, the first part he was offered was the gobbledygooker, but luckily didn't do that, and Vince made him the Undertaker instead, and of course that's a legacy of that
well, he thought that he
championship.
would be the gobbledygooker. It was
Right.
never confirmed
Right.
whether or not he was going to be, which the gobbledygooker is another terrible it's a terrible gimmick we explained on that episode.
Yes.
But there wasn't really a real storyline there.
No, it was
But
just a
for
giant egg in the middle of the fucking like ring, or not in the ring. It was on the friggin' stage for like weeks, and then it hatched, and it was a giant turkey.
Yeah, and
That was
but for some reason people like to see that one, and they bust out the costume every now and then. So,
it was
but
just like,
oh no, also somewhat Kane adjacent. We like prior to the first match against the Undertaker, and it became a recurring WrestleMania gag for many years. Pete Rose, baseball player, and well, woulda, shoulda, coulda been Hall of Famer if he wasn't a degenerate gambler. Um, for whatever reason, I think because they were in Boston, and they were in Boston. They were in the Boston Garden for like WrestleMania 14. So for some reason, they had a man in a chicken costume come to the ring and pick a fight with Kane, and it turned out to be Pete Rose.
oh God.
I don't know why, but everyone enjoyed seeing Pete Rose get tombstoned, and I guess Pete Rose really needed money, which he probably went right to the casino afterwards.
Well, I was gonna say, in a lot of ways, like, Kane kind of mirrored the Undertaker, but like the opposite. Like, like he had to go through all those shitty gimmicks before he finally got Kane and cemented his legacy. Whereas the Undertaker was like possibly going to be a shitty gimmick, but then ended up getting his, like actual good gimmick and cemented his legacy right away. So not only was like was he Taker's brother, but he also ended up, mirroring him in some ways, I guess you could say.
I suppose a black mirror.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
I
yeah, I do not know. But the Kane just has. Well, I mean, it seems like he just has this occasional run of bad luck where he either gets a shitty gimmick or a shitty storyline.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he has a good gimmick with a lot of storylines that are bad, but the gimmick is so good that he can recover.
Yeah.
I was like, I needed to make sure I wasn't making this up, but when Glenn Jacobs, the real person behind Kane, first started wrestling in 1992, he joined the United States Wrestling Association in Memphis, Tennessee, which was run by Jerry Lawler, who is known for having very gimmicky like characters and such. And he made his debut as the quote Christmas creature.
Oh yes, I forgot about that.
Who wore a green mask, candy cane striped sleeves, and tinsel. And apparently the costume was made by Kane's real life mother. He challenged for the title at the end of December and then left forever.
Yeah.
Oh god, you got to see how bad he looks like.
I'm sure his mom did a good job for what she had.
Honestly, I don't think I don't blame Kane's mom. I just think this gimmick is so bad. Oh my god, someone made a custom Christmas creature action figure. It's actually not a terrible action figure.
I mean,
But-
if someone like rolled up like to
But
like
just look at a picture of this guy and just
I mean,
All right, well,
honestly, like we have people dress up like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage. If I was watching a pay-per-view in the front row and there's a Christmas creature, that he would win the pay-per-view. They just like give him the real title. Just be like, all right, like.
He also wrestled at one point in Puerto Rico as Doomsday or Unabomb, which
I just like it's like legally distinct from the Unabomber.
yeah,
He is the bomb in the Unabomb.
I mean he was also wrestling in Puerto Rico, so I think they were like, oh, who gives a shit.
So I do want to mention one storyline that is terrible that is not Kane adjacent, and that of
okay.
course,
I actually was gonna do the last. I actually wanted to do a Kane one, and then we would like do a non-Kane one.
all right, do your Kane one first, and then I'll bring up my storyline that's not Kane adjacent and is terrible.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And it is go.
Yeah. So in what will be the final Kane one, because this has just been the very worst of Kane, which I think is just going to be the name of this episode now. Just the very worst of Kane and hard times for someone else, whoever Rob's story.
Honorable mention that's not Kane related.
The Kane X-Pac feud was very stupid. So this is 1999. This is the Attitude Era. So Kane is a loner. Kane is, just a angry monster. He's misunderstood, but underneath that, he hates everything because no one loves him. He doesn't have any friends. He's all upset. Despite Katie Vick, he doesn't have a girlfriend. He at least doesn't have a girlfriend who is alive. Do with that what you will. And Kane, this is when Redacted is creating the corporation, which is a stable, and the corporate ministry, which is a stable by the Undertaker and Redacted to to basically terrorize Stone Cold Steve Austin and kind of be dicks to everyone else. Um, D-Generation X kind of secedes from itself for a minute because Triple H and China joined the corporation, and the rest of DX is kind of a shell of itself without a real leader. So X-Pac decides, hey, Kane, you're a misfit too. Let's be friends. And Kane's like, oh my god, I have a friend. What is that? At this point, there were talks and even a design to give Kane a green D-Generation X outfit, but it never materialized, pun intended. And Kane joins DX. Kane and X-Pac become like, I think they did hold the tag team titles for a little bit. And Kane, or at least they were like doing well. So Kane ends up doing his thing. He's like, oh my god, I have friends. X-Pac makes him say suck it. Also, because we're still believed that Kane is a burn victim, Kane is using one of those like radio voice assistants where like he sounds like a robot and he has to hold it up to his voice to talk.
Okay.
And they made him say "suck it." It was pretty funny, but like looking back at it, yeah, this was pretty messed up. So Kane with his little buddy X-Pac and his newfound confidence, Kane ends up Kane finds and meets a girlfriend in Tori who is a perfect 10 and way out of his league. She's, well, I mean, she was kind of a butterface, but she was at least like a hard, like 8.5. And Tori and Tori and Kane are in love for all of 2 weeks, I guess, which in wrestling terms is about 5 years. Kane's probably ready to pop the question. He has his girlfriend and everything, and isn't that nice? He has his girlfriend, he has his friends. Kane's got his shit together, and it's nice to have a girlfriend who's actually living and breathing. So that's good. It's a warm body is always nice. It's a good change. We'll put it that way. And wouldn't you know it, X-Pac and Tori are having an affair. His best friend is cheating on him with his girlfriend. His girlfriend is cheating on him with his best friend. Oh no. Now, Kane, rather than, murdering all of them and just calling it a day and then going back to Katie and saying, I'm so sorry, dead girlfriend. What was I thinking about live women? I'll never have those again. Kane, of course, just gets sad and he sulks and he just has a feud with X-Pac, which I think X-Pac wins. I think Kane beats him and then X-Pac eventually in a cage match, which is the blowover. But X-Pac gets the better of him all the time because the other DX people, his real friends, who are a bunch of degenerates, just interfere and cost Kane matches and everything. Kane loses the tag team titles and all these other things, and Kane is upset, and Tori goes on to have a on-screen relationship with X-Pac for about a year, and things seem to go well for X-Pac. Kane, on the other hand, is just, he kind of gets over it and keeps being Kane, and then he moves on to other things, like a necrophilia feud in 3 years, where
Yeah.
they dig up that. So, yeah, very pointless.
Yeah.
All we really
Yeah.
could there have been other ways for X-Pac to betray Kane? Sure, but it wasn't really it wasn't even all of it's pretty stupid and pretty and quite cringy, but it was just dumb.
Yeah.
There could have been there's a million other ways for people to get betrayed by their tag team partner and friend. And it's okay if you bring a woman into it, but it can't be with Kane. Kane and girlfriend storylines never start or end well.
Yeah.
And he was basically being bullied by a man half his size.
Yes, that
And-
too.
Yeah.
X-Pac.
And he's losing.
Yes, X-Pac was one of the shorter and scrawnier wrestlers, mind you. It made no sense. And it didn't do any favors for Kane.
Yeah. Well, and
That was the
finally-
very worst of Kane. Rob, please get the Kane stank off this show.
Well, the next thing that I want to bring up, our last terrible storyline, is possibly one of the worst storylines in WWE history, and quite possibly maybe even the worst, depending on who you ask. It's a storyline that almost took down the wrestling industry because of how stupid it was and how much of a bad idea it was at the time. I am, of course, talking about the Brawl for All, which was a legitimate boxing tournament held with people who don't actually know how to fight for the most part.
And the one that does know how to fight is the last one that you expect.
Yes. It was a terrible idea from the start. There were legitimate injuries because, again, these guys are not professional fighters for the most part. Dan Severn was part of this tournament, and he is a professional fighter, but he dropped out because he said, quote unquote, I don't have anything to prove here, which basically means I'm giving you guys a break because I'm going to win this tournament if you let me stay in it. It was a terrible idea. It showed you took these guys that are supposed to be seen as these tough guys that can't be beaten, and they got their asses handed to them. Despite the fact that it was a shoot tournament, they had a favorite to win, which was Dr. Death Steve Williams. They wanted to win the tournament. Of course, he didn't win because it's a shoot tournament. And the guy who did win, which was Bart Gunn, was punished because of that.
Bart Gunn never won anything, really. Bart Gunn was a jobber.
Yes, he was a jobber, but he actually won the shoot fight and was punished because he won a shoot fight.
And as he was winning the shoot fight, people were like, oh shit, he can actually fight. So he was getting over. And the whole point of this tournament was that they wanted to build Dr. Death to be a contender for Stone Cold Steve Austin because they were running out of feuds for Stone Cold to have because, well, he pretty much ran through all of the main event guys and they weren't really sure what they could throw at him without making it seem like he could lose. So they were in a pickle at the moment. So they were like, okay, well, and Dr. Death was a good friend of JR, and he was winding down his career, and he had kind of never been in WWE, so they wanted him to, besides WCW, there was no other competition at the time. He had kind of been everywhere else, and they were like, you know what? Let's give Dr. Death a shot. Let's put him in here. We'll give him a main event run. He can make a bunch of money and then retire. So, wishful thinking. Very wishful thinking. A nice gesture. And the idea that they came up with, which no one takes credit for, by the way, there's a bunch of different people who could have come up with it, and no one takes credit for it. Well, but it is allegedly Vince Russo.
Allegedly Vince Russo. So JBL has said it's Vince Russo because JBL had brought up the fact that he thinks that the WWE should have had a hardcore wrestling division, and this was Vince Russo's answer to that.
Yeah, which they did eventually do a hardcore wrestling division with the hardcore title.
Yes.
Which everyone loved, the old school hardcore championship.
Yeah.
It was a great in between. It also was just something fun for jobbers to do.
Yes.
Because it was the belt that no one took seriously, but everyone could not wait to see it.
Yes.
It was kind of a paradoxical title in that sense. Because it also was a broken WWE championship belt.
It was duct taped together.
So it was pretty much the mirror image of it was pretty much the mirror, like it was pretty much the mirror image of the
It was
shattered mirror.
It was the
black-
Bizarro.
Yes, it was the Bizarro Championship. So Dr. Death, so they put together the Brawl for All. They decide it's going to be a shoot tournament because Dr. Death can take on everybody, and for whatever reason, but they wanted Dr. Death to win, and supposedly there was $100,000 cash payout to the winner to incentivize people to actually do it, because at first everyone was like, well, that's a stupid idea, and then they put real money involved, but supposedly they paid Dr. Death the money in advance.
Yes.
But and nobody else knew that it was that it was supposed to be a shoot tournament, but it was supposed to be rigged where Dr. Death would win. If they explained that to them, they would have been like, oh, okay, so it's a work shoot tournament where but Dr. Death has to go over. That's fine. Like, they would have understood and they would have done business because they work there. And nobody would have gotten stupid about it and shot on some for real. So they would have gotten what they needed, and maybe the Brawl for All would have been less bad, but still pretty terrible. Instead, they already paid Dr. Death, who got taken out by, I believe, Bart Gunn.
I think it was him. Yeah,
Bart Gunn did KO Dr. Death
in 10 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was and then they had to pay someone for real because he actually won the damn thing. Yeah. So they had to pay Bart. I forgot if they actually had to pay Bart Gunn or if they ended up paying Butterbean, which was his punishment, who was a prize fighter.
Yeah, but so that was
a legitimate prize fighter.
He got punished by having a match with an actual boxing match with Butterbean, a professional boxer at WrestleMania 15, and he got his shit pushed in because fucking Butterbean was a professional boxer and a prize fighter, and then he was fired shortly after that.
I've never heard the term "he got his shit pushed in."
Yeah.
What a visual!
He was knocked out in 35 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually
and he was never the same.
No.
Yeah. I believe they cover the Brawl for All in the Dark Side of the Ring. And then there's also there's a YouTube channel I watch called Kim Justice's Wrestling Road, and he covers a lot of 80s and 90s Japanese wrestling and that sort of thing. And he actually has an hour-long video about Dr. Death Steve Williams, and specifically the 90s period, before and after the Brawl for All. And the Brawl for All was actually the second worst thing to happen to him before then, because before he joined WWF, he was arrested in Japan for having drugs, importing drugs basically on an airplane, and basically the company he worked for had to fire him because it's a huge deal, that sort of thing, in Japan. And it was a miracle he didn't end up in jail, but they're like, you can't come to the country for a year. So that's how WWF was able to coax him into signing and then do this stupid tournament. I believe in the first round, because he wasn't knocked out immediately, but in the first round he injured himself. So then they're like, oh shit. So they changed the brackets, hoping he could Bart Gunn would be a layup, but he tore his hamstring, so he's in agony and then got knocked out because he can't put a lot of power in his punches because he can't use a leg. And it was just a truly a comedy of errors, but it's probably better than being in Japan in jail for long periods of time.
Yeah,
I guess. How much longer? Dr. Death died within a decade of that, I believe. I don't think he lived much longer.
Passed away in 2009.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
he lived for a while.
He lived
still
about
wrestled.
10, he lived about 10 years longer.
He still wrestled at a fairly high level in Japan. Afterwards, once his WWE stuff was done, they took him back. Not to the same extent, but he went from main eventing in Japan to kind of being hey, it's I'm tagging with this guy, that sort of thing. But then like he had a whole bunch of health problems and other stuff. So like, yeah, he died, prematurely, and this wasn't exactly like a highlight of his life. But
It's
like the
too
brawl,
it,
I'm
it's too
pretty sure
bad.
everyone can say that about the brawl for all. I, it's wild. I think the Dark Side of the Ring episode's pretty illuminating. Like some people being like, hey, let's just like hit each other for real. Like, let's go for it. Other people being like, so like we're gonna work, right? And they're like, yeah, we're not gonna do this. Like, especially like as it kept going, because like the brawl for all lasted for a long time, and the
Yeah.
matches were long, and the crowd was not into it,
Yeah.
and like it
Well, on
just
top of
dragged.
that, because it was boxing, for some reason they got it in their heads that they should use real boxing ropes too, instead of just leaving the ring ropes on there. So
Yeah.
so there was like a 20-minute gap where like the ring crew had to like basically like tear half of the ring down to like change out the ropes for like this thing that nobody gave a shit about. So it was a waste of time and a waste of money and a waste of bodies. It was just it was a total waste. And the payoff didn't even matter. What they should have at least done with it is just say, "Oh shit, well, Bart Gunn, who we never thought would ever get over, is getting over, and he is legitimately tough." Because I think Bart Gunn was like a former Golden Gloves champion, and like which I guess is a fun fact at a trivia night for most people, and like I guess like what you should have done, what they should have done was just look at what was happening and just say, all right, he wasn't our first choice. He wasn't our second choice. He wasn't even our 45th choice. But you know what? People seem to like him. So I guess we can give him a feud with Austin and see what happens. Even if it's just like one pay-per-view, let's just see let's give him like a college try, and we'll see if we could do something with him. But no, instead they killed the guy's career.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a shitty situation all around, and not surprised that it came from the mind of Vince Russo.
No, and I believe he got a bad concussion after the butterbean thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure, considering he was like sleeping slumped up against the corner, like I'm sure he was not feeling great.
Right.
No, so you know, all right. I don't know. There are many others. There are many other bad
Yeah.
storylines that we could get into,
Yeah.
but we don't have a full 24 hours. We all have jobs,
Yeah.
um, and other things to do.
And some of them don't even involve Kane. It's weird.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But there will be others where we will explain many other storylines that are terrible in pro wrestling. Actually, maybe we'll just have this a running gag of just like terrible storylines part X. And
Yeah.
maybe some will involve the same wrestler over and over. It will just happen to spiral into an episode like this. Maybe you'll be a bunch of random ones. I don't know. Maybe we could get Holtzboyer back on for the next one too, so that we could have like a big like cacophony of people. Um, but yeah, maybe we'll have a fatal four-way instead of a triple threat. We'll see what happens. But
Or would it be a brawl for all?
oh no!
Uh, get Bart. I was gonna say get Bart Gunn on the phone.
Oh god, you're lucky you live where you live, because because I would be spraying you with water and saying bad spaceman. But thank you everybody who has sat through this, and maybe you learned something. I'm not sure what that is or what you could learn, but thank you for choosing to destroy your brain cells with us tonight. I'm sure there were many more interesting choices you could have made, but instead you chose to make this one. And well, good for you. You have a very boring life. This has been Why Does This Exist? I have been Chris.
I've been Rob.
And I've been Spaceman Frank.
And remember, question everything.
Good night, everybody.